Welcome back, everybody. What is good? Happy New Year to all of you. Happy New Year to my two fabulous hosts on the show, or guests on the show, or whatever. They're the guys that you're all here to see and listen to anyway. You're listening to the Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan feature of Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. As usual, I am just merely your host, Joey Powell. Sean and Sherrell do join me as usual, but Happy New Year to everybody. Glad you made it. We finally put 2020 to bed. We got some new stuff to talk about, new things to look forward to, specifically around the world of Carolina basketball. And take a moment before we get rolling to tell you thank you for listening and or watching. If you're checking us out on YouTube, either way, however you're consuming this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. And if you're listening on some medium, please take a second to rate and review us. Goes a long way. We really appreciate it. If you don't like what we're doing, tell us you don't like what we're doing. We'll try to up our game. Boys, welcome in. First off, Sean, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's nice to do this after a win.
Yeah, Sherelle, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. No complaints. Happy
Yeah,
to be here. Yep.
long day of NFL football. Let's cap it and talk some college basketball. First off, uh, tell me about Nick Smith. For those who are just hearing this name for the first time, uh, he is kid from Arkansas, not a place that North Carolina typically recruits from. But he got an offer last week. Sherelle, I'll let you tell the folks a little bit about that recruitment, how it's developing, and then Sean, I'll let you talk a little bit about his game and what you see. Sherelle, go
Um,
ahead.
Yeah. So for the 75th time in Coast to Coast history, we're going to talk about a guy that UNC would have watched during the spring and summer evaluation periods if they had him, but he was definitely high on their list. He plays for Brad Beal Elite, which is the AAU team of Caleb Love. It used to be the St. Louis Eagles back in the day when Ben McLemore and a couple other guys played for them. Bradley Beal as well. And obviously they changed the name.
Hence the name.
Yeah. But he came through that program again from Arkansas. The first offer from Arkansas since Malik Monk, and besides that, I couldn't find another offer from Arkansas for the last 20 years. So again, a unique place for UNC to recruit. But you have to remember that there are a lot of high school coaches from that area who remember Roy from back in the day when he was at Kansas, and
Hmm.
Arkansas was in the Southwestern Conference, I think it was back then. Uh,
Southwestern, Big Eight. I don't know, one of those.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
years and
Big
years
Eight.
ago.
Right. But there are so many high school coaches who remember him. So North Carolina still has some gravitas in Arkansas, I would say. Smith, I think the best thing about him, and maybe this is going to be a welcome thing to hear from UNC fans, is that he can really shoot. I think we asked him, what's your number one thing, and at first he said shooting, then he said scoring, and obviously there's a big difference between shooting and scoring. But I do think he's a pretty good shooter. It's something that everybody to a T says they like about him. Other than that, he seems pretty open to North Carolina. He has a good understanding of the program from when we talked to him. And it seems like a good offer, and they're definitely going to need more guards in 2022 that we've been talking about, because there's a scenario where they only have 2 or 3 guards on the roster. So it's important to get more offers out in that class, and Nick Smith is a natural one, I would say.
Sean, I think if I'm remembering, 6'4" wing guard. If anybody has if anybody's not seen the article that was up on Inside Carolina last week, make sure you check that out. Sean, what else can you tell me about his game and his style? Sherelle was really was really good about letting us know his scoring capabilities, specifically around shooting. But what have you seen in some of his film?
yeah, 6'4", as you mentioned, pretty lanky. So it looks like he has some length. Pretty skinny right now. So definitely should be able to put on some strength down the road. I think one of the things when I was going through really his first 2 years in Arkansas as a freshman, he was listed at 6 foot, 120. So you never know, are they high, are they low? Is he really 6'4"? But at least that shows that he's been growing over the years, and could have another kind of 1 to 2 inches to get up to 6'5", even 6'6". So from a size, definitely has good size. Shooting, you mentioned, very comfortable catch and shoot, kind of current 3 point, college 3 point, NBA range. But when you're kind of talking about shooting versus, or Sherrell was talking about shooting versus scoring, he could definitely do both. Obviously, you want to be able to shoot the ball and not just be able to quote unquote score the ball and maybe be a 30% 3-point shooter, but he can shoot. But at the same time, he could get into the teeth of the defense, whether it was through pick and roll or off the dribble. And sometimes it wasn't all the way to the basket, but he could get into the paint where he had a floater, a little mid range, pretty good just ability with his body when he did get to the paint to be able to kind of avoid the taller defenders, finish with both hands. Not the most, I'd say, explosive guy off of 2 feet, where he definitely enjoyed being more of a 2-footed jumper than a 1-footed. But once again, he could get to the basket, he could do it off the dribble. So that was something I definitely like to see more than just him being a spot up shooter. So I think he's seen his ranking really kind of go up from really the 40s and 50s up to where he's at 25 right now. And really any of the events that he's been at recently, he's always gotten high praise. So I think this is a guy that will continue to increase from a skill set perspective, and he's already got a lot to work with.
Sherrell, what else you want to tag on to that?
I would just say he is a kid with a chip on his shoulder. I know that's something that's also in demand for a lot of schools lately. But just talking to him on the phone, exchanging text messages with him, kind of getting to know his family, he definitely feels a bit overlooked. And now that could be because there was no AAU basketball this past summer, and that would have been his big breakout. But I think from scanning some of the lists, the rankings lists, and who's getting offers from where, I think he feels a bit disrespected, and that's always a good thing for players to have that extra motivation, because you don't want to get someone who feels that what they have wasn't earned. And I think he feels like everything he's gotten as far as offers that he's really earned, and that he's had to take a harder road than most. So I think that's something to watch for, and that he seems like a pretty tough kid just in the beginnings of getting to know him.
Sean, I know you love when I ask this. Got any player comparisons for Nick Smith for our listeners and viewers?
I was trying to think in terms of player comparisons. From a Carolina perspective, nobody's kind of jumping out right off the top of my head. I mean, maybe Sherrell can add any Carolina players, but I think the fact that a mixture of the shooting and the ability. I don't. To be honest, Hunter Salas kind of jumped to my mind right off the bat. I think a much better shooter, but a little bit of the ability to get into the paint. Definitely kind of a 2 guard that is a natural 2 guard that can handle the ball. As kind of maybe a backup 1, or a guy that will be trying to play the 1 more in the future. Shooting, I think not a comparison in that one, but in terms of style of play, a little bit. To be honest, it was Hunter Salas that was kind of popping in my mind. But yeah, I think we've talked about the UNC wings, and how really the ones that have been standouts have been the guys that can really shoot the ball. And obviously it helps to be athletic and get to the basket, but you don't need to have a lot of ISO capabilities with what how UNC's offense is running. And I think that could definitely be a fit with his shooting ability, and his skill off the dribble is just kind of an added bonus. So I kind of avoided that question, but
that's all right. I'm not gonna fight you on the Hunter Salas comparison. I need you to take somebody with a very small, narrow, and able to comprehend mind like myself, and show me another picture so that I can get it. And I appreciate you trying to humor me there. All right, guys, another $1 million question. Who's the next one to receive the rose from Roy Williams and his staff? Sherrell, I'll go to you first.
That's tough. All speculation put out. This is speculation. This is not informed or anything. So I don't want anybody to get upset if he doesn't get offered in the next week or so, or whatever. But I think Brandon White, who is a forward in North Carolina, goes to Winston-Salem Christian. I think he's one who probably we should have on our radar. We were talking in our side chat, and me, Sean, and Ben, and Rob Harrington, and I think we all kind of agreed that Smith was the most likely candidate. And I think if you start talking about contact and who UNC is calling, and kind of us getting the word back, I think White is kind of primed. He's a local kid. I'm sure they have a lot of film on him. I'm sure they have good relationships with the coaches from previous recruitments. So he's one I would definitely watch. I think he's 6'9", 6'10" forward, that we've had an intro on in the last couple of months. And I think Sean We've talked about him on the podcast as well.
Yeah, I was going to mention that I think Sean or someone had done if it wasn't Sean doing a breakdown, I'm pretty sure you guys mentioned him recently, specifically because I remember that Winston-Salem Christian mentioned. So, Sean, anybody you would like to see get an offer next based on who you've been watching?
Well, I mean, I think the one, just going back to Nick Smith, I think the one good thing is just kind of getting out of the state of North Carolina. I mean, I think it definitely, especially for North Carolina to focus and try to grab, those top guys coming out each year. But I think it's nice to kind of see them looking out of state, especially as Carolina is trying to get back into that upper echelon discussion of teams and talent. So yeah, I think Nick Smith and Sherrell kind of offline kind of teed that one up last week, so I was able to watch a little bit more. I think it'll be interesting to see who they do target next. Really, we had the Dillingham offer in 2023, the first one to kick that off, and now we're back in 2022. And I think we're just going to continue to see most of those, come out over the next really 2 months, heading into that spring time period. Obviously, 2021 seems to be, unless some things come up in March, not a whole lot going on there. And this is really the time that UNC has done well in the past in terms of identifying some current juniors that maybe are a little underlooked going into quote unquote AAU season in the spring.
And I would throw another name out there, kind of under the radar, Colin Smith, who is a combo forward out of Dallas, who was a teammate of Harrison Ingram when this year or the last couple of years. 6'7", 6'8" combo forward. Steve Robinson has seen him a lot. UNC's seen him a lot. So I think that's one that just kind of we're monitoring closely that could, kind of go from just conversations to an offer pretty quickly.
All right. Good stuff, fellas. Appreciate you bringing the noise there as always. It's good information to kind of keep our listeners and viewers with their finger on the pulse of what's happening with regard to recruiting, potential prospects, offers, commits maybe down the line. We'll take a quick break before we pivot to looking towards the current team, looking back, but then also looking towards the current team's upcoming schedule. Want to make sure that I give some love to our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. New year, get you some new gear. Hit up johnnytshirt.com. Johnny T-Shirt has been supporting Inside Carolina for a long time. We want to continue to support them right on Franklin Street, johnnytshirt.com. Now that we've gotten through the rush of the holidays, you can actually start getting stuff. I think the postal delivery system has actually gotten back normal. So Johnny T-Shirt is going to be quick to get you your stuff. Go online, johnnytshirt.com. Don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers get an extra 10% on top of that. So make sure you use that code when you're ordering. But the biggest thing, go to Johnny T-Shirt, hit them up, take care of them. They've been taking care of us, and we want to make sure that we send them all of our business. Right now, we'll take a quick break, let some of the national guys run some of their commercial stuff, and then we'll get right back talking about the current team. All right, coming back in 3, 2, 1. Thanks for sticking around. This is the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell. With me still, Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. You guys are bringing the thunder this week, as they always do. Boys, let's talk about what's going on and what's going on the past week. After a really, really brutal loss to who I think is a bad Georgia Tech squad, the Tar Heels did rebound for a win at home against Notre Dame. In ugly fashion, and that's kind of what I want to throw to you. And Sean, I'll go to you first. At this point, does an ugly win matter?
No, I mean, at this point, a win is a win. It could have easily been 0-3 yesterday. Notre Dame is not a tournament team, a very suspect defense, which is kind of surprising why it was such a low possession game. But I think, seeing that last second shot fall short and then the ball fall out of bounds as the clock went to 0, I think, anybody that would take it, besides the people that might have been dumb enough to take UNC -10 in that one. But, once again, they had led 36 minutes of the Georgia Tech game and kind of gave that one away. So to kind of at least, go into this coming stretch at 1-2 in conference and a win, because, once again, a win just does so much in terms of confidence and the mood. where at least hopefully there'll be kind of a pep in everybody's step just getting on the board.
Yeah, we talked earlier in some previous episodes about how this team was starting really slow out of the gate, and now that that's neither here nor there, I feel like we don't really get the same anything from this roster at all. I feel like every game you're seeing different stuff, both good and bad. And after the Georgia Tech game, it was tough to see a loss, but there were some things that absolutely were improvements that came from that game, and also from the NC State game, as bad as they were. Uh, Sherrell, I want to throw to you. We finally got some lineup changes that we've kind of talked about here on the show the last couple of weeks. But did you expect to see two different lineups in two straight games from Roy Williams?
No, I think the first one really surprises because not only was it three people changing. Usually, when Roy Williams changes the starting lineup, it's
One
switching
guy.
bringing Cam Johnson in and sending Garrison Brooks to the bench or something like that.
Right.
That's the kind of change, or just sitting someone for a game to get their attention. This was not only taking three people, but three of your most experienced players or two of your most experienced players, and then your kind of prize recruit in the class. So it wasn't something done lightly, I don't think. And it usually comes around this time of year. There's usually one in kind of late December, and there's usually one kind of in early February. So the timing was familiar, but like I said, just the amount of moves was surprising, and I think it helped a little bit. But I think we'll talk about it, but it just comes down to the same root issue for this team, and until that improves, you're just not going to see a vintage Carolina team. I think people have to readjust their expectations, not in what Carolina can be this season, though that's getting close. I think in what they look like, you're going to have to just realize this is not going to be anything near a vintage Carolina team. It's not even going to score at times like last year did. I mean, last season they scored 98 points against Duke.
They could run with
Um,
people. Yeah.
yeah, and that's just not this team's DNA right now. I don't think it's going to be. This is going to be ugly basketball for the rest of the season. It's going to be, very throwbackish to the 1980s with 8 guys in the paint, and Carolina fans we're just going to have to accept it for at least I think the remainder of this year, because that is their best way to win right now. You saw what Day'Ron Sharp did yesterday. Just a phenomenal game, and that's their path to victory. You talked about you don't know what this North Carolina team can kind of do game to game. And Sean has said it the whole season. Offensive rebound, just the way they do that, partly because they miss so many shots, but the way they're able to do that just keeps them in games. And it's just going to look like this. So I think there needs to be an adjustment of expectation about how the product on the court is going to look.
For our listeners that remember the late 80s, early 90s Pistons and New York Knicks, a lot of that comes to mind as far as just the brutality that happens in the paint with this team and them trying to get on the board however they can. Uh, Something kind of leading out from from the rotation and the lineup changes. I feel like the bench is probably going to have to start getting a little shorter. Am I reaching here, Sean? Your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think it's been definitely good to see them just trying to figure out what can work and throwing a lot of different lineups and players out there. Because once again, you didn't go through the preseason, you didn't go through all the games to really figure out what people have. But at the same time, UNC's function best when it's going really 8 deep. I don't think we know who those 8 are right now, but at the same time, for instance, against Georgia Tech, and not to pick on him, but I thought Kessler's minutes maybe were a little too much. And maybe same thing against Notre Dame. So I do think there's still, Miami will probably see a lot of the same, but I think that as these different lineups are tested, that we will start to see the lineup shrink a little bit, and kind of your Puffs and Walkers are going to start to see their time decrease unless they do come in and are playing really well, and then they'll play more. But I think those two will be the guys that are kind of seeing the short end of the rotation sometime soon.
Sherrell, a similar thought I'll throw to you. I kind of feel like Kessler is going to end up being the odd man out, mainly because he got a late start due to missing some practice during install periods. But then when you've seen Baycott have the production that he's had, and Sean makes a great point about the minutes that Kessler was getting when Baycott was having a great game, if memory serves. And then you see how Day'Ron Sharp produced against Notre Dame. this past weekend. Those two guys have been really shining. I think Roy Williams is probably going to defer to the fact that he has 3 years of work with Garrison Brooks. Makes me think that Kessler may actually end up kind of getting that limited exposure role. Uh, is it bad for him to be kind of pared back for now and reined in a little bit, or at least have his minutes trimmed until he figures it out or gets a little stronger, or maybe just finds his niche?
Yeah, I think that question is more of an individual question as opposed to staff philosophy. I think with Kessler, I think you can see his confidence waning a little bit, and it's very hard to gain confidence when you don't play.
Right.
So I think for him, it might be a situation where you have to let him play through some mistakes, and maybe just side note, Mac Brown talked about this weekend about how Saturday night the opt-outs hurt UNC, but in the long run it was good for the program. And I think that is some of the lessons that I think maybe Williams and the staff need to use with Kessler, in that you anticipate him being there at least 2 years, but you have to build him up a little bit and give him some confidence that he can come in and do some things, not just next year when some people are gone, but even this year. I mean, we've talked about it so many times over the years. There's a game, at Florida State or at Virginia or somewhere where North Carolina is in a funk and they're down 5 with 8 minutes left, and Bro Williams goes to a strange lineup and somebody magically delivers
Hmm.
because they got that experience in November and December playing against, in normal years, teams who maybe weren't as talented as UNC. So I think the rotation, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I think it is going to pare down some as you kind of get into the meat of the ACC schedule. But I think he has to find a way to get Puff and Kessler regular minutes every game. I think it'd be bad for both of them if there was games where they got 1 or 2 minutes, just because UNC is going to need them, not just this year, but also in the future, but also because they're really talented players, and who knows what could spark them into playing really well. So yeah, I think for Kessler in particular, they need to keep him playing to build up his confidence.
And again, we've said it ad nauseum, so forgive me for beating this dead horse. But this is just one of those years where, excuse me, missing so many games, because of the later start of the season, really handicaps players like the two that you just mentioned, Sherrell, in Johnson and in Kessler. Uh, Last thing I want to ask about specific lineup changes and the kind of the makeup of this team. We talked about, just the unbelievable uh, issue of kind of, I guess this was a problem of riches that UNC had with post players. And I'm starting to wonder now, looking at the statistical production, is it possible for UNC to get production out of two post players in the same game? And I don't see that. I know they're going to have to, but it just hasn't happened yet. Sean, tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, I think Notre Dame. Well, once again, Notre Dame is a smaller team and definitely on a defensive end, probably one of the worst teams in the ACC. But while Dayron had a great game, Armando was just. I thought he missed a lot of easy shots. So I thought that could have been a game where those two were playing well. So once again, this is a team that is basically going 3 deep with true centers and playing two at the same time for the most part, which makes it hard and makes it congested. But I think last week we talked about on the podcast for Brooks, if he can start hitting, really that 15 to 17-foot jump shot. And I think we did start to see that a little bit more this past week in both the games. And now all of a sudden, if he's doing that, it makes it a little easier to dump it down low to Armando or Dayron without having 3 guys on them. So I think, once again, Dayron, every time he gets out on the court, sometimes he's going too fast for himself, but you see him, he's playing so hard and he's continually getting better. And you have Armando, who's been so efficient and, so much more just athletic and quick to do everything this year. So I definitely do think we'll start to see the two bigs playing well together. Now, can they get it where, they're playing well together and then you substitute a guy in and he's continuing at that high level? yes and no. And once again, it's also going to come down to the guard play and can they enter the ball to the bigs
Can we
and
make a good post feed? Yeah.
and can they provide spacing? And those things are going to still take a while, but I do think it's possible for the two bigs to play well, just given the talent level. While they both operate very close to the rim, I think their skill sets, as they continue to play off each other and feed off each other, we'll see that.
And to your point, with Brooks hitting two threes this past week, even if one banked in, it still counts on the score sheet and means the teams have to respect that. He's a good passer. I would love to see him trigger the ball low a little more. At least his veteran experience could help start the offense a little more than maybe he has been, because we've seen issues with the perimeter players making good feeds to the post.
I mean, I think he's been very good at catching really on the left block and then kind of turning into the paint and seeing somebody diagonal open from three and hitting them with a hard, strong pass that they can really just catch it and go into their shot instead of catching it to the left or right. So that I've been happy with. I thought he had a few good passes to Dayron down low. I think you get into trouble where somebody like Armando catches up top, and teams don't know he's not going to shoot it. Once again, he hit the shot against NC Central, but hasn't come close really on any of the
Right.
other 12-foot jump shots, and that's where you get a lot of trouble. At least with Dayron, he's such a good passer; he can throw it down low. But I think you get into trouble when Armando's the one catching it up top, and he did have a few nice drives to the basket, even some of the left-handed ones that he missed. But without kind of that shooting ability or passing ability, you kind of lose his skill set when he's right there.
All right, so let's before we put a bow on this show, let's look forward to Miami this week. I'm going to assume that Chris Likes is back, just because I really want to watch him play, and I love seeing guys that are 5 foot nothing, getting 30 points a game, which I fully expect him to get 30 points against the Tar Heels if he plays. Sherrell, what do you expect to see out of the matchup with Miami, and do you think we'll continue to see a new lineup, or you think we might stick with one that we saw last week?
Uh, I think Kerwin Walton and Dayron Sharp and Armando Bacot, I think, have solidified themselves as starters for the rest of the season. I think it'd be pretty difficult at this point to pull them out, just because their play has been very good. And Walton, because he does something that no one else, frankly, on the team is capable of
Mhm.
doing at a level above 30%, which is, hitting threes. I guess Andrew Playtech as well. But, I think Walton has proven to be invaluable for this team. And you were talking about how Sharp and how Baycott kind of work together and having two centers and everything. Just having Walton out there, man, you could see the space start to open
Yeah.
up a little bit just from by himself, literally by himself, hitting those threes. You could see the lane open up a little bit. There were some better angles to enter into the post to get Sharp the ball. So I think he's solidified. After that, I think it's kind of a hot hand deal. I think Leaky's played much better. If we're going to crush him when he plays
Mhm.
bad, we have to acknowledge him when he plays good. I think he's been, fairly competent to good the last couple of games.
Steadier anyway.
Steadier is a very good word. Very much steadier. I think from there it's kind of a hot hand approach. RJ Davis was set to start on Saturday, but was late, and so Caleb started. And I think you'll see Roy Williams going to go with whoever is playing the best in that particular game, and that'll be the lineup moving forward. Whether or not Garrison gets back in there, I don't know, because that will require taking out Brooks or Sharp, or excuse me, Baycott or Sharp, and both
That's
are
your
just
offense right now.
yeah. But right now they're giving you everything. So against Miami, I'm curious to see if there's going to be any change to how North Carolina handles ball screens, since they're going to see so many. If they start switching things at the top, maybe they play zone for a possession or two with their length, just to switch things up. So I'm curious to see if there's going to be any kind of wrinkles like that, just because North Carolina's big men didn't do a good job of recovering, and the way they hedged against Leszewski, just let them wide open time after
All
time
day.
after time. And I understand that is the scheme, but part of that also is not playing up to par, I would say, on the player's part. So combination of those things, I'm just curious to see how they handle that.
Yeah, and it's something I'd love to ask you about too, Sean. Do you think we're going to see, based on what we saw against Georgia Tech, you think there may be some other 1-3-1 defense in the future against the Tar Heels, because they sure did struggle with that down the stretch against Georgia Tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see a lot of zone going forward, and then on offense, just trying to involve the bigs and pick and roll, just because they've played it differently, but it's still an issue when they're not able to stop the ball handler, um, and kind of letting the offense dictate versus the defense dictating what's happening. I think Miami, from a talent perspective, they're in the very bottom tier of the ACC, in my opinion. So this should not be a loss. I know Ken Palm only has it as a 3-point game, but at the same time, they are getting some more players. They beat Purdue, which I still don't understand how they they did beat Purdue, given Purdue's lead on them. But also feel like Jim Larinaga also knows how to coach against Roy Williams in
Always
terms
has.
of he knows the spots to pick on offense. He on defense. They're I think top 30 in terms of not giving up offensive rebounds, which is obviously Carolina's strength. So from a talent perspective, you would expect Carolina to win, but you never know with Miami, especially what wrinkles Larinaga will have, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of open corner threes off dribble
Dribble
penetration.
drive. Yep.
Yep.
I love that. Sherrell, give me one thing that you would like to see this week, aside from the obvious wins. What's something you would like to see from this team this week?
Continue to take care of the ball. We've been very critical of the freshman guards of the team, really, with turnovers, and I think they were below 10 on Saturday.
They started
Granted,
with 5 in the
They
first,
started at 5 and then
Right.
just went quiet, which
then
was
ended with
Gr-
8, which is
right,
phenomenal for such a young backcourt.
right. Granted, Notre Dame is a terrible defensive team, so let's make sure we consider that. But just if they can do that, just don't throw the ball away and get the ball to your bigs, and you have a good chance. Even if you're shooting 31 or 32 or 33% from three, they've kind of broken through and shot a little bit better because of Walton. So they don't need like to go crazy from three. They just need just small little bits, and they need shot attempts. If they can just not turn the ball over, they're going to get more shots than their opponents more than likely, and that will allow them to win games.
Sean, what's something you want to see this week?
I want to see continued improvement from the freshman guards. I think, we had talked about it ad nauseum in terms of them playing together and the plus minus and whatever all the numbers were saying. So it was, I think, a good step to see them play differently. Going to the Georgia Tech game, and I'm trying to, UNC went on the 8-0 run to take the lead, and Georgia Tech called a timeout, and I think UNC substituted. They put in Love for Davis, and at the time I was wondering, why are you not kind of keeping up with the same lineup? And then kind of on the flip side against Notre Dame, and I know Davis, led the team in plus minus, but I thought Caleb had been playing well as Carolina was starting to come back. I think they were still down 4, but I liked what I was seeing from Caleb at the end, where he hit a jump shot. He missed the pull up, but it was in and out. So I thought it was a good shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then he made the 3-pointer. He followed the 3-pointer up by playing tough defense on Hub. And then he actually switched when they tried to run the pick and roll with the guy who killed us, Big Lashevsky.
Yeah.
And that possession ended up with kind of Notre Dame's offense just stopping, running it, and they tried to get the ball to the mismatch. They ended up taking a forced shot, and the ball went out of bounds for Carolina. So those few possessions, I thought Love played really well. And once again, it's just, can they continue to do that, knowing that, okay, now you're the primary ball handler in the game, and you don't have to go back and forth with, Love or Davis. And when they're in the game, can they just start to improve a little bit here and there? Not asking for a lot, but I think if you can get steady improvement, that'll help in the long run.
Well, and also, Caleb Love, this won't show up in the stat sheet, but I do think he was much more active in passing lanes yesterday. Got his hands on a couple of deflections.
He had a lot of deflections.
Yeah, and I think that bodes well for him. If nothing else, keeping guys engaged, history will tell you, is more likely to help them break out of an offensive funk than anything else. And just I'll throw in my own thing. I'd love to see the continued stability of Leaky Black. I'd love to see him be able to build on hitting that game winner. I think that's obviously the biggest, probably the biggest shot he's hit in his career. So I'd love to see that continue to grow for him, because I think the team can only get better as he continues to stabilize. All right, Sherrell, you seem to be telling me I've got some vibes here that you wanna throw one more bit of chum into the water for Sean before we
Yeah,
wrap up.
just one last question. So we talked about the instability of the lead guards and some of the stability that Leaky Black has brought. And he was recruited to North Carolina initially as a lead guard, and he played some last year and started games at lead guard. So Sean, what do you think of? He played a couple minutes against Notre Dame at lead guard as well. So what do you think of increasing hits minutes there to try and stabilize the position?
I guess then the question goes to who, assuming Walton is being paired with him, who's getting
Mhm.
that other wing spot. And I think that, that's the question. In terms of Leaky running the point, first I've enjoyed him guarding the point. Whether it was Kentucky or Georgia Tech or last game, I think he's done a pretty good job, because at times he's struggled on the wings, but I have thought he's done well defensively. Um, we've talked about it before. Leaky's at his strongest where he's grabbing the defensive rebound and pushing the ball up the floor and kind of initiating the offense. I think his vision still is a question mark, especially on the break. But once again, if we're playing a little bit slower than everybody's accustomed to, I do kind of like it, because it takes a non-shooter and it allows them to kind of dictate where the ball's going to the shooters or to the scorers a little bit more. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that more, especially if the freshmen continue to struggle. And I do think he is equipped, to kind of hopefully continue to have strong games. Once again, he's still playing 29, 31 minutes. At times, I think that can be a lot where it's an offensively challenged team. But even from the benching that he took, I thought he's been taking smarter shots. And I do think when he is able to get into the paint, he has an advantage. Even if he's missing there, he's taking better shots, I thought, once he's got into the paint, on the little 6'2" guards, just because of his size. So I think UNC is trying to use him in different ways. And I think trying to see him at the point guard a little bit more. I definitely think that could be positive for the team and the wings that are trying to get shots.
Sherrell, is that an acceptable answer for you?
Yeah, I like the idea of initiator versus facilitator. I think it gives you a perfect insight into his strengths: initiation versus facilitation. And that's not a shot at him or anything, but that's what he's good at. And I think that could really help UNC in stretches. I'm not saying to bench RJ Davis or Caleb Love permanently, but just in stretches, if maybe the other team is on a run and Carolina just needs to make sure they get into their stuff, maybe you lean on a junior to be able to do that.
Well, and if anything, everything's better in moderation, right? You take a spot, just like the staff does with the run and jump, or just like they do with anytime they throw out a zone defense. It's just a little bit just to throw the other team off kilter. It works both ways. Sean, I love I love the analogy there. I appreciate you bringing that. Boys, any last thoughts before we close up shop this week?
I'll go with my two thoughts. as always, one.
Do we need to make a segment like with a
I
sounder and everything
guess
for Sean's 2 cents before we go
home? The first one is Dayron. I think it's going to be interesting to see. You kind of started to notice it, but Notre Dame didn't do a great job. But of teams trying to force him away from his left shoulder, everything he does is pivot toward the left and kind of right hook or go. And once again, teams are going to start to shade him differently. So it'll be interesting to see how teams do that and how he responds to that. But once again, I know, he missed 8 of 18, but the energy he played and the fact that he was the one who's dominating when UNC needed to come back was a great sign. And then I kind of skipped over the question earlier, so I'm just going to go to this. But you asked, is there anybody you'd like to see get a scholarship offer? And this one's probably kind of a long shot, but AJ Casey, who's a 6'8" kind of stretch 4 from Chicago, was let's see what he's ranked right now. He's ranked 21. And UNC hasn't had success in Chicago. That's usually Duke's area. And he's transferred a few times, but he's a guy that I remember watching as a freshman at one of the USA basketball events and being, pretty impressed with his ability at that point. So that's a guy outside of kind of the two guards that we need to focus on of one that I'm interested in outside of North Carolina.
All right. Well, your 2 cents have been deposited into the bank of information for our listeners, and we appreciate it. As always, boys, it's been fun. I really appreciate you guys making the time every week and always bringing your A games. Hopefully, we'll have more wins to talk about next week because I do think it gives us a much better vibe on the show. But we appreciate you being here as always, Sean Moran, Sherrell, McMillan. Great insight, great information. For those of you guys who are listening and or watching, we appreciate you being here too. Happy New Year to you. Make sure you rate and review the podcast. This has been Coast to Coast on InsideCarolina.com. We will catch you next time, as always. Late.